Here's one little question that has no simple answer. How does being alone bring us closer? My name is Peg Fong. I'm a journalist and an educator. Come join me as we explore loneliness together. Edvard Munch's most famous work. It began as a walk. It ended with a scream. He was with his friends out in the Norwegian countryside when they separated. His friends went off into the distance, and the painter stayed behind on a bridge, alone. That's when the painter remembered the landscape changed. The sun went down. I felt a gust of melancholy. Suddenly, the sky turned a bloody red. Some cities have more people than cars. Think New York and Venice, Italy. In other cities, cars outnumber people. If you've ever been to Murrieta, California, you would be vastly outnumbered by steering wheels, tires, and rear-view mirrors. For every one resident in this commuter town near Los Angeles, there are 2.36 vehicles. And when you look at a map of car ownership, the biggest clusters are all around Los Angeles, a city where commuter hell is an endless ring of people stuck in cars behind other people stuck in their cars. LA is also a lonely city. All those cars where people are behind the wheels in a ring of freeways may have something to do with it. Some say that people in LA are lonely because everyone is ambitious, competitive, looking for stardom and success. There are many cities that may take the title of being the loneliest in the world, but how many cities can claim to be the place where the loneliness scale was invented? Developed by psychologist Daniel Russell at UCLA in 1996, the loneliness scale is a survey of 20 questions. How you answer questions like, how often do you feel left out? And how often do you feel part of a group of friends measures your level of loneliness. 1 is never, 4 is always. So let's step back and do our own measurement. Los Angeles has a lot of cars. Los Angeles has a lot of lonely people. The hypothesis: if cars make people lonely, then what will make people less lonely? Skateboards? Bicycles? Maybe the answer is walking. That's the answer that Los Angeles resident Chuck McCarthy came up with. He was between acting jobs and needed money when he came up with an idea. It was more of a joke, really. He saw all the flyers from people offering services. If dog walkers could make money walking dogs, maybe he, a person, could earn some extra cash by walking people. The more he thought of it, the more reasons he came up with why it actually might work. There was no overhead and almost no investment needed to start his venture back in 2016. He ruined his own joke, he said in a TED Talk about his business. Chuck McCarthy just needed fabric markers to write out the name on his t-shirt of the service he wanted people to know about: people walkers. And he needed to buy shoes more often. The last thing on McCarthy's list of things he needed was time, something he thought he had plenty of being out of work. For a price, Chuck McCarthy was willing to take humans out for a walk. What McCarthy didn't realize was his joke, his plan to make some money by walking people, struck a deep chord with strangers on a global scale. Sure, some people asked him questions like, do you use a leash? And do you also have to pick up people's poop? But the most constant question he was asked about his business was why? Why would someone pay to walk? What Chuck McCarthy learned was an understanding of everyone's need for connection. In Rochester, Kent, Sandra Samuels Allen started a new life.
I used to go out on my own And I thought, well, this is a bit lonely, isn't it, you know? And, you know, you talk to people in the coffee shops or in the clothes shops, so you get to know the feel of who they are. But I thought, well, what next?
The next was nothing. Nothing happened. For weeks, Sandra's attempts to make connections and friends went nowhere, and she remembers the moment when she realized her acute loneliness. It was the night of December the 30th. She was, as usual, alone. Sandra sat on her bed and thought.
There must be a lot of lonely people out there who's similar to me.
She thought it would be nice to walk with someone. She had moved to a place where she knew no one, but she knew that she couldn't be the only person in her new home who felt alone. Loneliness was not just an unspoken problem for her, but also, Sandra realized, probably something others were feeling. She thought, could she walk her way out of loneliness? She posted on Facebook, no pressure, no talk of loneliness or being alone. It was a simple question to anyone out there. Wanna go for a walk? Since the COVID outbreak, Dr. Nick Somerton, a GP in Yorkshire and a public health physician, has been seeing a rise in isolation and loneliness. Patients with long-term illnesses have been forced to stay inside. Dr. Somerton talks the walk. He is Walk Magazine's medical expert and knows how important it is, even in times of quarantine and self-isolation, to get out and walk, even if it's just right outside your home. He's also a member of Ramblers, a UK association that has people rambling all over the country on outings. A poll by the organization found that 1/3 of people surveyed said walking helps them to unwind and improves the quality of their sleep
as well. So if you get a good night's sleep, you often feel better and more engaged with life the following day as well. I mean, the other benefits, the positive benefits of walking is it improves your resilience. So the ability to cope with the knocks and setbacks that life often throws at us.
Now, walking might, for many of us, just seem like moving our legs and maybe observing what's around us. You might have your ears tuned into a podcast or listening to music, or you might be walking in silence. But history and research tells us how and where you go makes a difference. Dr. Somerton says recent studies show that if you walk with a purpose, that is, not just meandering, you walk faster and you walk better in terms of health benefits. Walking somewhere can actually heal you. Ask the ancient Greeks and Romans. They built these temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing in Greek mythology. These places, known as Asclepions, were built away from the ancient cities, on platforms above bays and gulfs with the air soaring upwards.
On these sites, there were often woodlands, there was running water, there were excellent views and fresh air.
Walking to these temples was part of the healing.
I think we just know it makes you feel better. Why exactly the Romans chose and the Greeks chose the top of hills or rivers, it's not clear from the writings why they originally started choosing these sites, but I think generally if you go to one of these sites, it actually makes you feel better.
For Dr. Somerton, walking is a calling. The Ramblers groups aren't just getting people together to walk, but the benefit of doing it with others helps those who are lonely, and people have to take the lead at times.
So for people who are feeling down, it's not only the benefits of walking, being in a walking group, but also benefits of talking, but also the benefits of getting a bit more involved and building your confidence as well, because building self-esteem is a key element of walking as well, because low self-esteem, in itself will lead on to anxiety and depression.
You may have heard during the first weeks of the pandemic last spring, there was a rush on toilet paper, Clorox, Lysol wipes, and hand sanitizers. Along with shelves being emptied, So were rescue shelters. People worried about isolation and lockdowns and being alone adopted cats and dogs in droves from animal shelters. Having a dog is a good thing, says psychologist Stanley Coren, a world-renowned dog expert.
And one of the neat things about a dog is that he provides structure for you, because you do have to get up and feed him. So that means that you're not going to spend every day sort of in bed until 1 o'clock. And also, the dog needs to be walked and exercised. And that's going to get you out of the house and moving around. And psychologists can tell you that, a little bit of exercise and a little bit of structure in your life are really good antidotes for depression.
It's what Sandra Samuels Allen found after her first walk, when 8 people took up her offer to join her. After Sandra founded her group, Walking with Fitness, she realized that going for a walk wasn't something she would have done if she had stayed in London.
I wanted a quiet time. I wanted to move
Here's
away
one
from
little
that.
question that has no simple
because
answer.
life can be so
How does being
stressful,
alone bring us
even then
closer?
going into work and stuff
My
like that.
name
So
is
I wanted
Peg
a more
Fox.
calm
I'm a journalist
aspect
and an
of you
educator.
drive somewhere, you can walk
Come
down the
join
road,
me
you're in
as
the
we explore
countryside. And
loneliness
for me, it was
together.
the countryside that is the open space and no other elements around you apart from the trees and the grass and the lakes. That works, it really does.
There is an emotional connection to being in nature, Sandra believes. Most famous walk, Dr. Nick Summerton reminds us. We've tapped into something that the ancient Greeks and Romans knew. He was with his
The
friends
ancients
out in
often
the
understood
Norwegian
the benefits
countryside
in
when they
the Greeks and the
separated.
Romans about
His
where they put
friends
their
went off
healing
into the
sites and their
distance,
well-being
and the
sites
painter
on
stayed
top of
behind
hills
on a
with good
bridge,
views, with
alone.
forests around,
That's when the
fresh
painter
air,
remembered the
sunshine.
landscape
All these things
changed.
have been
The sun
beneficial
went down.
2,000
I
years
felt
ago,
a
and they're
gust
still
of melancholy.
beneficial today. And that's a
Suddenly,
sort
the
of
sky
a
turned a
context
bloody
where it's
red.
worth having a walk.
Europeans and North Americans are starting to understand some cities have more that has been known for centuries. Think in Japan, says Dr. Venice, Italy. In other cities, cars outnumber people, and others call it if you've ever been to Marietta, California, you would be vastly outnumbered by steering wheels and tires. It's the concept that being out in the woods and among nature one resident in this commuter town near Los Angeles from physical illness and loneliness. Vehicles. And when you look at a map of car ownership, the biggest clusters are all around Los Angeles, a city where commuter hell is an endless ring of people stuck in cars behind other people stuck in their cars. LA is also a lonely city. The Norwegian painter people are behind the wheels, overshadowed throughout most of his life from childhood until his death. With some say that people in LA his mother died of because everyone when he was 5, competitive, his older, much less for stardom and success. His surrogate mother died of many cities that may take the title of being the loneliest in the world throughout his life. But how many cities ill health to be the place where the respiratory illness was invented, and what we would know today developed by psychologist Daniel Russell at UCLA in 1996. He even painted a scale with a survey of 20 questions. Evening on the shore. How you answer questions one like sitting how alone, do you feel left out? Distance towards and how often do you feel part of a group of friends? Most famous painting, your level of loneliness. Nature comes to him. One threat never and overwhelming is always. The original title of this painting is actually the scream of nature. Los Angeles has a lot of cars. The Norwegian painter Los Angeles has a lot of depiction between our inner selves and the outer world. If cars make people lonely, then what will make people in an earlier version of the work? The man in the painting is only observing nature around him without expression. That's the answer that Los Angeles resident Chuck that is universally recognized. He was between and green fields and the shoreline that looks gray and an idea, and the violent colored sky really depicts he saw all the flyers from people offering services in an endless screen. If dog walkers could make money walking dogs, there are 2 versions of that painting. A person could earn some extra cash by walking, and the other in Oslo's the more he thought of it, the more reasons he came up with why it actually might work. There was no overhead orange and red sky or what is most needed to start his venture back in 2016. In the background, hovering and lingering his own joke, he said in a TED Talk about his business.
The yellow
Chuck
orange
McCarthy
colour
just needed
is the
fabric
dirty
markers
end,
to
so
write out the
it's
name on
also
his
the
T-shirt
greenish
of
colour,
the service he
dirty
wanted
end.
people
So he
to
has
know
used the
about.
colours to
People
represent
walkers.
illness and disease.
And he needed to buy shoes more often. Is screaming and on his own. The last thing on McCarthy's list of things he needed was time. A concept I've always thought he had plenty of being out of work. My brick cooling says what McCarthy was willing to take describing the scream from nature. A sensation from someone internal was his joke, rather than a cry that could be make some money by walking people.
It was a
Struck
symbolic
a deep chord with
representation of
strangers on a
fundamental
global
anxiety,
scale.
being alone
Sure,
in the world.
some people asked him questions like,
from
nature do you use a leash? And do you also have to pick up your surroundings is therapeutic? But the most constant question research and studies over the last 20 years. Why would someone pay? Many of these experiments were conducted by Yoshifumi understanding of everyone's need therapy for connection. Professor Miyazaki at the Center of Environmental Sciences at the University of Rochester, Kent, has written Sandra Samuels Allen started a new life in nature. It's a technique known as
And I thought, well, it's a bit lonely, isn't it, you know? And, you know, you talk to people in the coffee shops or in the clothes shops, so you get to know the feel of who they are.
Our bodies should be with nature. Humans have existed away from nature only a fraction of our time happened. By Professor Miyazaki's attempts to make connections, 99.9% of her timeline and she remembers has been not when she realized her in the natural environment. It was the night of December the 30th. Humans, Professor Miyazaki says, alone. Our bodies have adapted to nature. Sat on her bed and automatically we synchronize with nature. That's why, without voicing it in so many words, we feel the need to get back to nature. She had moved to a place where she knew no one. Lonely. But she knew that she couldn't be the science behind it, as studies conducted by Professor Miyazaki and others have shown was not just an unspoken problem and blood pressure are lowered, but also Sandra realized probably something stress hormones are reduced when we are surrounded by trees. She walk her way out of loneliness. Trees also emit an essential oil called phytoncide, no pressure, which have been proven to increase your immune or being alone. It was a simple question. In one study, participants were given a one-week vacation in an urban area and another in the forest. They walked the same hours and distance in the forest and in the city. While those who vacationed in the forest showed improvement in their immunity cells, the group that was in the urban Dr. Nick Summerton, a GP in Yorkshire, and a public health physician, has been seeing a rise in isolation. Another study had people walking in an urban park with long-term walking in the street forced during spring, fall, and winter. Dr. Summerton conclusion was the same. He is walking in a park has a stronger effect and relaxation it is, even in the times of quarantine on the street isolation. To get out, Professor Miyazaki says it's just right outside your balance we have when we are also a member of Ramblers. The problem with a UK association that has not synchronized with others in the country on outings. It is normal for people by the organization found that one third of people communicate with others. Walking helps them to communicate with nature, the quality of their sleep
as well. So if you get a good night's sleep, you often feel better and more engaged with life the following day as well.
The benefits
the other benefits, the positive benefits of walking is it improves your resilience, the ability to cope with the knocks and setbacks
Another research
life often throws at us.
Conducted on residents who lived in a seniors for many of us was done by taking our legs them to sit on a rooftop deck where they can see trees. You might have your ears tuned into a podcast to sit on a ground floor level where they face walking in silence. Just the view of nature with enough to show better how and where you go makes a difference. Professor Miyazaki says while the benefits of being and walking in nature are certain, he knows Dr. Summerton says recent studies show that if you walk or because of their ill health, that is, who not just get out for a walk in the forest, walk faster and do something better that can connect you to nature, he advises. Walking somewhere can actually heal you. Even wooden furniture in your home will provide benefits. They built these temples dedicated to nature, bring it to your surroundings. The god of healing for the Greek mythology. Being in nature can be places known as Asclepions, even in built away from the ancient cities. Other living things. Platforms above bays and gulfs with the air soaring upwards.
On these sites, there were often woodlands, there was running water, there were good, excellent views and fresh air.
Walking to these temples was part of the healing.
I think we just know it makes you feel better.
Chuck
Why
McCarthy
exactly
made
the
a
Romans
business out of
chose
walking
and the
with
Greeks
strangers,
chose the top
people
of
who were
hills
willing to
or
pay because there is
rivers.
value
It's not
in
clear
movement,
from
to
the
not
writings
being alone.
why they originally started choosing
Medway
these sites,
towns
but
in
I think
Rochester,
generally
Kent,
if you go to one of these
newcomer
sites, it actually
Sandra
makes you
Samuels
feel
Allen
better.
took her
For
despair
Dr.
on a
Summerton,
cold December evening
is a
and extended her hand
The Ramblers
outwards
groups
in an act
aren't
of
just
faith.
getting people together
There are
to
benefits
walk,
to walking,
but the benefit
especially
of doing
with
it with others, helps strangers
who are
and people
lonely.
you may not
And
know
people
at
have
first.
to take the lead at
The act
times.
of being
So
together
for
on
people
a
who
path
are
is
feeling
the
start of a journey
down,
taken together.
it's not only the benefits of
It's
walking being
something
in
that
a
Sandra
walking group,
found
but also
out.
benefits
In
of
2 years,
talking, but also the
walking
benefits of
expanded her
getting a
circle,
bit more
making
involved and
it
building your
wider,
confidence
and
as
at
well,
the
because
same
building
time,
self-esteem
shrinking her
is a
loneliness
key
and those who
element of
joined
walking
her.
as well.
8
Low
people showed up
self-esteem,
for the first
in
walk
itself
she
will lead on
organized.
to
Today,
anxiety and
there
depression.
are nearly 800 members of her walking group. Ask someone who might be alone. The words are easy. Anyone can
You
say
may have
it.
heard during the
Everyone
first
can
weeks
do
of the
it.
pandemic last
Wanna
spring,
go for
there
a
was a
walk?
rush on toilet paper.
Want to know
Clorox,
who's always
Lysol
ready to
wipes,
go for a
and
walk?
hand sanitizers.
A
Along with
psychologist
shelves
being
and dog
emptied
expert
for
Stanley
Stanley
Rescue
Coren
Shelters.
says, going for a walk
People
with your
worried
dog
about
makes your
isolation
dog's
and
tail
lockdown,
wag.
and
But the
being alone,
benefits are really for
adopted
the
cats
humans.
and dogs
Regular
in
walks
droves
add
from
structure
animal
to your
shelters
life. At a time when you
Having
might be
a dog
feeling
is a
alone
good
and
thing, says
isolated,
psychologist
when
Stanley
you walk,
Coren,
you are
a
connected to
world-renowned
something
dog
that
expert.
even the ancient Greeks
And
and
one of the
Romans knew
neat things
two
about
and
the
a half
dog
thousand
is
years
that
ago.
he
They built
provides
their
a
healing
structure
temples
for
in
you
places
because you
where
do
its
have to
citizens
get up
had to walk
and
to
feed
reach
him.
them,
So
away
that
from the
means
town
that you're not going to
centers.
spend every day sort of
A
in
good
bed
walk
until 1
leads to a
o'clock.
good
And
sleep.
also,
And Dr.
the
Nick
dog
Summerton
needs to be
advises
walked
when you
and
walk with others,
exercised.
take
And
turns
that's going
being
to
the
get you out
organizer.
of the house and
Movement
moving
is
around.
healthy, but
And
the psychological
psychologists can tell
benefit
you
of
that,
planning
you
and
know, a little
leading a
bit of
walk adds
exercise
confidence.
and a little bit of
It's
structure
not
in
a
your
small
life
thing
are
to get a
really
group
good
of people heading in the
antidotes
same
for
direction.
depression.
Not everyone
It's what
will
Sandra
finish at the
Samuels
same
Allen
time,
found
but starting
after her
together
first
is a
walk,
beginning.
when 8 people took
It
up
is
her
motion
offer to
and
join her.
connection.
After
Walking
Sandra
is an
founded her group,
unfreezing of being
Walking with
stuck.
Fitness,
Whether
she
it's in a
realized
car
that going
going
for a
nowhere
walk
anytime
wasn't something she
soon,
would have done
in
if
a
she had
traffic
stayed in
jam,
London
or
I wanted
inside your
quiet
home
time. I
during a
wanted
pandemic.
to move away from
The
that.
best kind
The
of
hustle and the
walks
bustle,
lead us
because
back to the
life can be
wild.
so stressful, even
Yoshifumi
in going
Miyazaki
into work
believes
and
in
stuff
the
like that.
healing
So I
of
wanted
nature.
a more calmer
Shinru
aspect of
Yoku.
could drive somewhere, you could
Bathing in
walk
the
down the road,
forest
you
or
could
a
be in the
park isn't
countryside.
taking
And
a
for me,
literal
it was the
bath, but it is
countryside,
an immersion
that
in
is
an
the open
environment
space,
that can lower your
and
heart
no
rate,
other elements
increase
around you
your
apart from
immunity, and
trees
reduce
and the
stress.
grass and
It is
lakes.
connecting back
That
to
works,
nature,
it really
not
does.
screaming in
There is an
solitude
emotional
at the
connection to
disconnect.
being in nature,
All
Sandra
you
believes.
need to do
And
is
when
walk.
we walk,
And
Dr.
breathe.
Nick Summerton reminds us
We may be alone,
we've tapped
but
into
we are
something that
alone
the ancient
together.
Greeks and Romans knew. The ancients often understood the benefits in the Greeks and the Romans about where they put their healing sites and their well-being sites on top of hills with good views, with forests around, fresh air, sunshine. All these things have been beneficial
Together
2,000
was
years ago, and they're still
Kelly
beneficial
O'Reilly.
today. And
Theme
that's the sort
music
of
by Ian
context
Lefevre
where it's
and
worth
Ari
having a
Posner.
walk.
Our sound engineer is Jen
Europeans
Devine.
and North Americans are
Producers
starting
Debbie
to
O'Reilly
understand a
and
concept
Guillermo
that has
Serrano.
been known for
Your dog
centuries
wants
in
to go
Japan,
out
says
twice
Dr.
a day,
Summerton.
but you can take
Some
me
call
out
it
for a walk
philosophy,
anytime.
and others
Listen
call
to
it
past
therapy
episodes
and
and
even
future
a
ones.
science.
Anytime you do
The
a
Japanese
30-minute walk.
consider it
This
bathing.
series was
It's the
executive produced
concept
by
that being
Terry
out in the
O'Reilly.
woods and among nature has health benefits that can help heal us from physical illness and loneliness. And we'll be right back. The Norwegian painter Edvard Munch was overshadowed throughout most of his life from childhood until his death with illness. His mother died of tuberculosis when he was 5. His older, much-loved sister, who was his surrogate mother, died of the same disease when Munch was 13. Throughout his life, Munch was plagued by ill health, including frequent respiratory illnesses, and what we would know today as depression. Back then, he called it melancholy. He even painted one with that title, Melancholy, Evening on the Shore, which was one man sitting alone looking off into the distance towards nature. In Munch's most famous painting, The Scream,
nature comes to him, threatening and overwhelming. The original title of this painting was actually The Scream of Nature, and throughout his life, the Norwegian painter used nature as a depiction between our inner selves and the outer world. In an earlier version of the work, the man in the painting is only observing nature around him without expression, leaning over a bridge. But the version that is universally recognized, the blue and green fields, the shoreline that looks gray and white, and the violent colored sky, depicts a figure not quite human, engulfed in an endless scream. There are two versions of that painting, one in the Munch Museum in Oslo, and the other in Oslo's National Museum, where curator May-Britt Gulling is an expert on Munch. While the orange and red sky are what is most striking about the scream, in the background, hovering and lingering, there are the greens.
The colors are a bit sick. The yellow-orange color is a bit dirty, and so is also the greenish color, dirty. And so he has used the colors to represent illness and disease.
The figure Munch portrays is screaming and on his own, frozen in that moment of horror. Perhaps a concept I've always thought of how loneliness feels. May-Britt Gulling says what Munch was doing was describing the scream from nature, a sensation from somewhere internal, rather than a cry that could be heard with our ears.
It was a symbolic representation of fundamental anxiety, being alone in the world.
This disconnect from nature can be restored, and synchronizing with your surroundings is therapeutic, according to lengthy research and studies over the last 20 years. Many of these experiments were conducted by Yoshifumi Miyazaki, a forest therapy believer. Professor Miyazaki at the Center of Environmental Sciences at the University of Chiba has written books about the effects and benefits of being in nature. It's a technique known as Shinrin Yoku. Shinrin is forest, Yoku is bathing. Professor Miyazaki says our bodies should be with nature. Humans have existed away from nature only a fraction of our time here. By Professor